afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, March the 4th, 2025. Hard to believe we're already into March. I would like to start the meeting with our territorial acknowledgement. We acknowledge the land on which our school and district buildings are situated. It's the traditional, unceded, and unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin people. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples on the land on which we gather here today. And attendance, I'm just going to do that fairly quickly, just so that we know who's around the room and around the table. We do have some people on virtually as well. So Chair Boland.
Here.
Vice Chair Humphreys is here. Trustee Doherty.
Here.
Thank you, Kim. She's virtual with us today. Trustee Gannett. Oh, sorry, he's not here. Yeah. I'd forgotten that he had to leave. Trustee Gannett sends his regrets. Trustee Kaiser sends his regrets as well. Trustee Primo.
Here.
Trustee Rajamani also sends her regrets. Trustee Ruddy.
Here.
Thank you. Trustee Ding sends her regrets, and Trustee Sydney Doherty, student trustee Sydney Doherty.
Here.
Thank you, Sydney. And Director Nimi here. Superintendent Barnes here. Superintendent Poirier here. Superintendent Smith here. Superintendent Cromwell
Here.
And Superintendent Nicol.
Here.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All right. I would like to ask for a mover and a seconder to approve our agenda today, please. Trustee Boland, thank you. And Trustee Primo, thank you very much. All those in favor of this agenda? Looks like that is carried. Thank you. And are there any declarations of conflict of interest on the agenda that you see before you today? Seeing none. Okay, now we'd like to move into closed session, and I need a mover and a seconder to go into closed as well. So Trustee Boland, Trustee Doherty. Thank you very much. That's good news. Okay. So we will move on to staff reports to the board and supervised alternative learning updates. I believe Superintendent Nichols is going to take the lead in this one.
I'll just go get
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Yeah, no worries. And you've got numbered 7.1, 7.2.
Look at that.
Oh. How did that happen?
I don't know.
Shelley's a mind reader.
She is. She wasn't even here.
I know. Awesome. Hopefully she could see us now.
Probably wouldn't. Probably sitting down enjoying a beer, watching a game.
So we're hoping anyway.
Yeah. Watching the Blue Jays.
Oh, these are for. Okay, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. So Principal Warkowski and myself here just to give you an update in terms of the supervised alternative learning, and in particular that we recognize that this year is a pilot project in terms of using a centralized approach for doing the supervised alternative learning, or the SAL process. So just as a bit of a background, with that, we know that with the supervised alternative learning, we're focusing on secondary students that are not achieving success in terms of credit accumulation, but also success in terms of attendance at school. So there's a disconnect happening. Prior to this year and prior to this pilot, what was happening was there would be, for a SAL meeting, there would be the principal of the school, there would be the school superintendent, and then there would also be family school trustee. And with this new process, we have Principal Rakowski and myself, both as for Principal Student Success as well as Superintendent with Portfolio Student Success. In addition to that, with continuing education, we both share the same portfolio. So we're at all meetings, but of course the principal and vice principal of the school would be present. And then we have consistent trustees that would be present at the meetings as well. So in terms of that, the rationale for having that as a pilot project, part of it is consistency, but the other part of it is efficiency. So recognizing with the efficiency that, in fact, just speaking with Trustee Gannett in his previous role, he actually remarked that one of the hardest things in terms of being able to organize these meetings was actually the schedule of the superintendents. And so by having a centralized process where the dates are already given ahead of time, and with actually our wonderful executive assistant, Sharon here, she's able to organize those dates and then organize the schools to ensure that everyone is ready and available for those dates and to coordinate the families too. But the other part too, again, recognizing that with these students and the concerns that we have for these students, there's a consistency as well in terms of the quality of the SAL meetings, the accountability that goes along with it, and the adaptability too, that there's a consistent approach for that. And I'll turn it over here to Principal Koski just to talk about some of the intended outcomes in the procedure. Yeah.
So you have the report, so I won't speak to everything, obviously. Some of the parts that we wanted to highlight was the participation of the participants. And we see a really great value in both the student and parent attending. And we had SALs actually this morning. And we can have parents joining from home even, right? So that allows more access if they're not able to get to the school. So and then we are speaking with the student about what the plan is instead of making the plan without them. So we see great value in that, and we strongly encourage parents and students to attend. And we get to meet them. Had a character this morning, but he was very engaged and part of the plan. So that's what's important. We find that the time is effectively used, and like Scott was saying, with Sharon organizing all of that for us, we send out a form to schools ahead of time, and they fill in time slots when it works for them and when their community partners can attend. And Sharon works with that. If we have a wait, I think we've always managed, if we had a wait list, we know we're able to move things around and accommodate everyone. So it becomes very efficient for that. And then, with our portfolios, what's interesting is that, we can take a look at what courses fit for the students. So not just the continuous intake courses, which we have offered through a teacher at Mackenzie School, but even access to some of our adult education courses, depending on the needs of the student and age and what kinds of things that they're interested in. So it allows us, to make those decisions fairly quickly, like most times right in the SAL. We know what courses are available, where there's space, and can leave that SAL with a solid plan. So that's been helpful as well. And both, either whether they're through continuous intake through Mackenzie or whether they're through adult education, they allow students to work through at their own pace. So that's the nice thing too, because we know that SAL students are not taking 4 courses. So they are sometimes getting behind, and that doesn't always feel great for them. So if they can work through a course a little quicker, there is the potential to start another course after that. So the fact that their continuous intake has also been helpful for our SAL students. Also, the fact that schools are supporting through student success. So we're seeing more students remaining closely attached to their schools and attending maybe 1 day a week. One student today, we decided on 2 days a week where they can go in, get support from the student success teacher, from the CERT teacher, and keep those connections going. It isn't always that way, but we're seeing an increase in that as well. The central student success team. So our team, has a good understanding of what's accessible, and we're also working very closely with, when we have our guidance team meetings, our student success team meetings, informing them of what the SAL process looks like. So they're also very familiar with that, because the more people that are familiar, the better we can support our students. So those are just some highlights from our, outcomes that we're achieving to this point. And I think it's me for current status. I think it's.
I think it's. Oh yeah. And then I'll do the
Then you'll
impact
go?
down. Yeah, great.
All right, so to date, from actually in the first semester, we had 38 cell meetings and we approved 35 of those. That, you know, the 3 that we didn't approve was because we didn't need a cell. They ended up actually having more than 2 courses. It wasn't, you know, any other reason other than they didn't need a cell to serve their purposes, so they could remain full-time without having access to a cell. So 35 were held through the process that we're piloting this year. We had a total of 15 credits earned out of those 35 that were approved. And in addition to that, we had a student who was able to work on some PLAR, and 5 junior PLAR credits were obtained as part of their cell. So that was a good success story as well. And then you can see the data about, you know, how many meetings we've been having and how many students we work with each time usually. Today was a bit smaller. Today was 4, but in general, we have about 6 to 7 students that we're looking at a cell for in our meetings.
In terms of the impact, you'll see a number of qualitative data and then also some quantitative too. And this was done from a survey that we gave to secondary schools for the principals, vice principals, but also for the student success teams, whether it's a student success teacher, the student support counselor, or the guidance counselors. And so we just pulled some of those, and I just wanted to highlight a few of them there. Again, when you review these, you'll see that there's a lot of positive remarks. I do want to point out though the one in the middle, you know, missing the critical eye and conversation that are for in person, and that certainly is warranted. I would suggest for Principal Orkowski and I, as we go along with these meetings and we get more comfortable being virtual, that in fact what Principal Gagan did today, and she's done for the last few meetings, is she literally takes the computer and puts it in front of the student, because what she's recognizing is, even though the conversation is for everyone, it's really about the student. So for Principal Orkowski and I, we're really just having a conversation with the student. And of course, being friendly and being educators, you know, we're able to break down some of those awkward barriers. Maybe there's a few laughs at first because they don't really know us. But what we do find is that when it's a student-focused conversation, that there is a lot of benefit to that. And then the other people that can support the student, be it the parents, be it the members of the school staff. So it is where we're trying to reduce that barrier. Krista also mentioned as well that the one remark, the smooth system, essentially coordinated. And again, because continuing education is usually a next step for the SAL process, and both of us having that portfolio, it makes it quite easy and efficient. And in fact, a number of conversations happen ahead of time with the principal before we even get to the meeting to help coordinate that. In terms of the 2 percentage numbers there, that's 78%. Recognizing that in terms of being able to be from it being central and being completed across the system, 78%. What I didn't include in there, which was a similar question, was that 89% basically said that it was beneficial to reduce the barriers, be it especially the geographical barriers. And of course, the 100% in terms of recommendation for it to be continued for next year, based on the secondary teams that we talked to, or that we surveyed. And then the last piece of data, just from the chart, and at first glance from this chart, we're looking at last year, semester 1, and this year's semester 1 data. And just to highlight a few things on there, when we look at the columns where the students who were scheduled full-time and the students who remain full-time, think of that sort of like as a before and after. So at the start, they were this, but at the finish, where were they? And likewise for the students that were scheduled part-time, so that's the start, and then moving to full-time, that's the after, or the pre and the post. And just out of those numbers, two remarks on that. The first thing is that this data is messy, and the data is messy because the students and their lives right now sometimes are a bit, unpredictable, just based on where they're at in their lives. Which again, this being a temporary tool to sort of recognize that we can pause some of the rigors of the academics so that they can help with the things. A very common thing would be counseling that would be happening at this time too. But what's not seen in the data is that for this year, we were able, by the end of semester one, to have over 50%. In fact, it was 58% having full-time status, and 41% last year having full-time status. So there was a difference from that. But because the data was so messy, it actually took Principal Wachowski and I going back downstairs a few times to go through the data with some of our tech, with the tech department, to have a true understanding of what was happening. I'll turn it over to Principal Wachowski.
Okay. And just for clarification too, so full-time SAL basically means they are registered in one or more credits. So it doesn't mean the same as if you were full-time in person. And part-time SAL is when we wouldn't necessarily be, you aren't attached to an academic component, but you maybe have a SAL to counseling. You may have a SAL to work. So that's what the difference is between part-time and full-time SAL. And I'm glad you explained the numbers, because that was,
Yes.
that's challenging.
Just to add though, but the key part though is that maybe they don't have a course right now if they're part-time, but there's a non-negotiable connection with the school. So how often are you, which again, whether we're doing it centrally or before, that's always been the process.
So some of the next steps that we're considering would be, and I think the first nugget says improvements to intake form. And I'm not sure whether it's improvements or it's just more collection of information ahead of time. So there is a pre-SAL checklist, and there is a request for SAL where there's a bit more detail. And when we get those from schools, we have a better picture, overall picture of where the student is at. And Scott always asks some really great questions of the students. You know, if you're comfortable, you know, tell us how you got here. Like, well, you know, obviously we're here to support you, and the more we know, the better. But even today in one of our meetings, you know, it came out that the parents and the school had a wonderful conversation ahead of time and had a good plan in place. So it does come out, but if we had that ahead of time, it would probably help in our decisions to support the student as well. And as Scott said, the information, the data is a little bit messy. So, you know, we were talking to the Aspen team today about, you know, how could we, because it was a lot of work for them to pull the data too, even if it was just for the last year and this year. So they're going to reach out to some other boards to see, you know, how they collect and monitor the SAL data, to see if there's other ways that are maybe more efficient for us to pull that information. So those are just a couple of the speaking points for the next step.
And that's right. And I guess the other next step, which we didn't include it here, is that we want to take a look at data for basically the first half of this second semester. And again, just to see if we're able to compare that to last year. And again, we'll just have to see how messy that is. But that's our hope to do that too.
Thank you very much. Questions, comments, wonderings about? Leo, you must have.
Thanks. I like the idea for the stats. I mean, even though it was messy, but this big number 5 that shows up for the students who moved to full-time, right? So that has to be good news for at least those 5 students. And then we were talking about this earlier. So we were talking about like the community partners. Are they consistent, like with the SALs? Is it the same person for all the SALs? Just the same person for the family of schools, or?
Yeah, great question. So it's actually
I give that to Susan.
Great question, both of you. So it's consistent in terms of the school itself. So as an example, if we're with ADHS, there'd be a community partner attached with ADHS, which would be different than with RCI or, yeah.
Oh, that's good, right? You had that consistent. And then when I was doing some SALs, right, you get called in at the last minute. Sometimes like the student wouldn't be there, or if the student was there, then there'd be very little that the student would say, right? They just had to head down and just, okay, you know, this is what the adults in the room talked about. So it sounds like, you know, from your perspective with this, that they're having more of an input and they're talking about their situation and what they would like.
So to your point, actually, Leo, so actually today, when we started, there was the school team, and then the parent was on, you know, on the virtual meet, but just the parent. So we had just simply asked, where is, you know, and she said, oh, just hang on. And then the student came on. So then we could have that conversation. But again, it's all, you know, we're sensitive, recognizing that a lot of times for students that are in this situation, there's mental health and wellness issues. So maybe there is a legitimate reason why they do not or cannot talk with us, because again, we're strangers, we're on a screen. So we try and feel that out at the beginning, but then if there is a level of comfort, then we quite frankly, we fully engage the student that way.
Because if you're deciding their future, it'd be nice to have their input. You know, that's what
100%.
good. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments from anybody? I had a couple of wonderings about, do you have a feeling that you've got more input from parents using a centralized version, or maybe you can't really tell? Because again, we've all been kind of around the table at various times, and sometimes got really a lot of input from parents and sometimes not so much. I don't know whether you feel like you're getting more consistent maybe input.
That's a really interesting question. And it's easy to survey the principals as an example, because they know what it was like before
Right.
and now. But for a number of parents, it would be different, right? Like they would, for a number of the parents, in fact, most of them, it would be new to them this year. So that's an interesting one. I think what's key out of this, we recognize that, we might be the consistent piece, but I would suggest that the most important piece is the connection with the school has with the home. And we certainly see that in those conversations, that by the time they get to us, like Krista and I, they've already been through a number of different strategies and next steps, and they worked with the family on that, and that's quite obvious to us. For some of the ones that have not been approved, we recognize that maybe they got to that, they made the decision to go to the SAL, maybe there's a few steps that they could do before that.
And I would say from my own experience pre this, I don't remember ever offering it to a parent to join virtually. I don't know if it was ever a thought of my own. So now that we're doing it this way, like we have had a number of parents join virtually. So it could be an increase
Might be.
that way.
The only other question I had was around the adult continuing education link, because we know how critical that piece is, and that tends to be where we kind of direct our SAL students to continue their work, right? Is through adult education for the most part. Is that fair? Is that a fair statement or not?
I'd say it depends.
It depends.
Okay.
Because if they're grade 9 and 10, we really don't have a lot of courses that
That's
they can
true.
access. And that's actually probably our highest population would be of SAL students, would be grade 9 and 10 students. So we use the continuous intake through Mackenzie school for for most of our grade 9s and 10s.
And so is that a virtual, like, how does that work?
It's like e-learning.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. That's what I figured.
So it depends. It depends on the need of the student. Some might be able to do a co-op through adult education or another course, but it just depends on the grade and what the needs of the student.
So do you have a sense that communication with the adult and continuing ed piece is a little stronger perhaps than it had been in the past? Because my sense sometimes is that the communication with the school and the adult and con ed piece just maybe could have been improved. And I just wondered if you feel that that's stronger now, particularly if you're wearing that hat too.
I wouldn't be able to comment on what it was like before,
No.
but I mean,
And maybe,
especially Krista more than me, but definitely the conduit for the continuing education runs through. And so a number of times those conversations have already happened before the meeting has happened, just to see what is available, what is
so
possible.
it's not a surprise, because I think sometimes that had been the issue in the past, perhaps.
And we've had members of the adult education team joining our student success and our guidance meetings to help support the understanding of what kind of programming we can offer. For example, we just had Melissa Frisk from Literacy Basic Skills join our student success meeting, and she's already had a reach out from one of the schools to give them a bit more information. So.
And the only other question I had was, maybe that's it. It's just around, do we have and I know pulling the data is not easy necessarily, but I guess it's two pieces for me. So are we seeing a decrease in the number of SALs we've been having over the last 5 years? So I think right after COVID, we had a lot of SALs, it seemed. I don't know the exact numbers, but so is that decreasing? And then do we have an idea? Are we able to track these students so that we know what proportion actually comes back to school full time? Or And I know that's hard to sometimes
Hmm.
pull out. I just wonder whether or not those are pieces we can wonder about and maybe start to track if we haven't already.
No, really good question. So we can say that from last year to this year, again, by full-time, by SAL definition is different than,
Yes.
but in terms of the SAL definition, we did see an improvement from last year.
Right.
And we also know that last year, semester one, there were 46 SAL. Now, of those 46, some were renewals from the year before.
Okay.
And this year, semester one was 45. So basically the same number. But to your point, though, it'd be worth checking to see what it could look like years before that.
And maybe there's no advantage of looking backward, but we probably do need to look forward at least to making sure we can track that over time. But I would be interested to see how many of those students actually come back to school. Like, that's a question. And maybe we don't know, right? I don't know how many actually come back and are either full-time or part-time in the school. Anyway, sorry for the.
That's a good question.
I just wanted to share one piece of information that sort of surfaced yesterday at exec that's related. Because this is a pilot, we feel that we need to make a decision for the 25-26 school year in advance of next year. And so what we are planning is we would bring a follow-up report to the May board meeting at the end of May with a recommendation from staff about either to continue the centralized model or not with the rationale provided. And then that's when we would, hopefully the board of trustees would support, not support, but that's when we'll make the decision.
Yeah.
And so that way, either way, then staff have the month of June to get organized for the 25-26 school year. So I just wanted to share that so that all trustees know that at the end of May, we'll have a follow-up report. Because that way we have, it'll give us time to get ready for September with either model.
And the other piece of that then would likely be to identify the two trustees that should be sitting on that committee, because I think the intent was that we would have the same trustees for the school year as opposed to November to November, which is what our committee structure tends to be. So we can keep that in mind as well. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, Leo, go ahead.
Add to your stats, right? So just, you had mentioned like last year's 45 and this year's like 45. So is it all the same people, coming from one year to the next? And then the other thing would be to track just their graduation rates, so as we're moving along, what percentage of people that, somehow have touched a SAL program, are we graduating? So just like percentages, we've had, over the last 2 years, 90 people, involved in SAL. How are they progressing? How are they, and then if they are actually graduating, like are they improving?
So it's that impact, right?
Yes.
The
The outcomes.
outcome, we're looking for outcomes. Okay, there aren't any other questions. I don't see anybody on the board and nothing on the table. Thank you very much, Scott and Krista, for your input and for your hard work on this as well. Looks like it's working really well and it's certainly benefiting our students. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Our next item, 7.2, is our special education data, and I think I'm looking at Jenny, Superintendent Smith, and Angela McGregor Stewart, going to bring us up to date on what's happening from a data perspective, at least from SECED. So welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, we wanted to come provide a bit of an update to you today, especially, sorry, I'm just going to log in here. Closed my computer and lost everything. Especially as we're heading into the spring and heading into budget season, and just thinking about some of the key pieces that you may want to have in terms of information, thinking about some of the key data to understand the needs across our system, understanding the supports that are in place right now. We know that it's mentioned in the report that historically the Board of Trustees has approved a budget, it's an investment into specialized services, with last year's budget investing approximately 700,000 above the ministry funding for specialized services.
And so we just thought it would be helpful to come at this time of year to give you some of the key information and data so that you have that as we're making decisions going forward. So we're helping to help you understand the needs of the system, what current supports look like. And as well, we thought we would share with you some of the areas of challenge that our team has identified and has been working to support. And with that, some of the next steps, just as demonstration of the reality that the team is reviewing our data and then making decisions and planning to improve going forward. Okay, so I'll turn it over to Angie, who's going to do a little walkthrough of some of the key information in the report.
Sure. Thanks for this opportunity. So just to start, we have the background, and the background sort of encompasses the specialized services staff, and keeping in mind that when we're talking about our specialized services team and supporting students, it's supporting all students with special education needs, and certainly not limited to students who have IEPs. We have intervention plans or any supports that we could provide for schools at any level to support these students. And that is our key to sort of or how can we help? And we come in and we're working with school teams to build capacity at every level to make sure that we're maximizing the supports that we have, both within our schools and at the central team level. So we did write out who is the staff that we compartmentalize on our central staff team, the ones who will go to our schools to support to support all of the schools across the county. Some of those positions would be coming out of ministry budgets as well that are allotted for specific things like our assistive tech, as well as our autism leads. But that is our team. And when we get together and connect, these are the people that are coming together to do all of the central learning together for our school board. I'll mention as well, just in addition to the $783,268 that the board put in on top of what the ministry provided, we're always looking for finding ways to further support. And this year, in addition to that, thanks to a couple of grants that were sort of pilots that the ministry did, as well as grants that our specialized services department applied for, we have an additional $319,859.07. So we've been able to do a lot of great work with that. And that work is, in part thanks to us applying for those grants and receiving those grants from the ministry to do that work. I like that we're presenting data, and I always appreciate the conversation that comes with it, because there's always a narrative behind data, I find, especially with special education. So what we first shared with you is the students with individual education plans that we have in our board. And that represents 19.4% of the students who are registered with us at the time that we took that data, which was in January. So there is a representation of that in the chart that you see. And we have explained that it's showing we're kind of coming up to sort of some stability or some balancing after an incline. I think narrative is needed a little bit there, however, because we do still see our needs increasing. Certainly our needs aren't going anywhere, but we have changed our approach a little bit. The board, we've worked in the last 2 years, and we're continuing to work on focusing on our primary grades and looking at not modifying programming. And in those really early years, in some cases, we have some gaps. We're still coming out of COVID, but even then, kids are little and they have gaps in their learning, and it doesn't necessarily need to equate to an IEP. So in our data here, this is showing IEPs, but it's not showing what we've moved to, which is intervention plans that we have for these students. And just on a quick, to help with that, last year, I don't have this year's number yet because we're still working, but last year we had 838 intervention plans. And then what we do is we track that and we find our own data after. So when we met with schools after to say, how is it going? How did it work? Because keeping in mind an intervention plan isn't a formal legal IEP document, but it is what we're saying. We're focusing on this. We're working with parents and schools and students to say, this is our focus and this is what we're working towards, because we see big gaps, but those gaps don't necessarily represent a learning challenge or anything. It's just in some cases misinformation. So in our conversations back with the schools for those intervention plans, it was, did we see limited gains, some gains, good gains, or great gains? So just a summary of that, when we compartmentalized good or great gains, we had about 47% of those students were making good or great gains. And more were making some and more were making limited. So even if you're thinking about that, and some of those gains might have been on students we're looking at from kindergarten to grade 1 or 1 to grade 2. So we even still have time to work on these intervention plans and really focused supports before they're getting out of primary. So that number will continue to grow. But if we think about that, that's 800 to 900 kids that we were not modifying for this year and not creating IEPs for, but very clearly putting a focused plan in place to meet their needs. So it doesn't, I think that helps explain the data a little bit too, or what the data doesn't show for all the right reasons. We also broke down student placements for you. We have, I would say this really great model in our board where we have some self-contained classes, some students who are IPRC'd into full-time special education or partially integrated. But it's not, we also have a lot of inclusion, and a family gets to choose whether they want to have their child IPRC'd identified and placed in a special education class, which would be full-time special education or partially integrated, or if they would like a fully inclusive learning environment. And it is an option. Even in schools where even in schools where it's present, it's still an option. And if it's not present in a school, in a community that a student is in, I'm thinking high school at this time, they have the opportunity to attend one of those classes, but it's by choice. And 1%, a little over 1%, but not at 2% of the students that we have in our who are deemed as supported by special education are in a full-time small class. And so the 1% is full-time special education, that's all day, and 0.7% is partially integrated into a small class. So these are students who would have some time in a sort of a special education classroom and sometime in the regular classroom. And again, that's all by choice. It's not a families get to decide. And I love that we have that model, and we see benefits to both, and certainly we can we're glad that they're there. We broke down for you data by exceptionality so that you can see that there in our board. And the next data that we brought to you is on graduation rates. This again, the data needs some narrative because we have programs and pathways within our board that the ultimate end goal is not graduation as far as getting your Ontario secondary school certificate. So these are, valued pathways. This with clear, distinct learning goals. It's the right move for those students. I also will link it back to some of our CIAC conversations where they really talked to, Jenny brought some of the ministry stats around what it meant to be, I've just lost the word, successful. Yeah, successful. And that's the word. And the definition of success. And we were talking about the definition of success. And often the ministry, when they talk about success as far as students completing high school, is that attainment of the OSSD. And we have pathways for which a very successful and well-targeted goal for students is the Ontario Secondary School Certificate. And for some students, it's the certificate of accomplishment where the program is so tailored to those students, and we are building in success, and we are preparing those students for the future, whatever that future looks like and whatever those students need. And the ultimate goal isn't the OSSD. So that's not reflected in our graduation rates, because what the graduation rates pull, they're looking at OSSD no matter the pathway the student's in. So it skews our data, I feel. But that's why I like the narrative. Some of our areas of challenge, and I'm sure they're not unique to our board, I think they're everywhere right now, is the increase in students with a diagnosis of autism. And the graph that is there is the history of our supports in the board for you, and it's showing, you can clearly see that increase moving up to 483 students in January with a diagnosis. Other students who we are also supporting who have the profile, but we wanted to keep that number there as far as diagnosed. But it's, again, there are more students than we're supporting. So that's been a really, like that continues to be a steady challenge for us. And we have moved as well to our 2 lead positions with our school board and most school boards right now. Like even just a few years ago, our leads for our autism team, we could set that criteria, and not too many years ago, they were like an educational assistant position plus other training, and right. We've moved and shifted to having registered behavior analysts at the lead of our team. So registered behavior analysts are there since last summer. The College of Psychologists is now the College of Psychologists and Registered Behavior Analysts. So it's an extremely high qualification and level of education that they have. They have a master's in behavior plus 2,000 hours to put in before you can become, it was a board certified behavior analyst, and now they're registered with the College of Psychologists and Behavior Analysts to be what we call RBAs. And we are incredibly fortunate to have 2 RBAs at the lead of our work and our system work. And we're, you know, in addition to that, as far as central staff, our whole team supports, like our consultants and everyone is supporting students. We have 7, we call them inclusion support assistants, who support across our district, to support plans implemented, plans put in place, to support schools to put plans in place that have been with goals set by the registered behavior analysts. But again, we have this as an area of challenge because the challenge is we don't feel we're meeting the needs in that area.
With 483 students and the 2 RBAs. It's a stretch.
Yeah, for sure. Another area that the numbers are just where the numbers are called, the number of students are and the number of staff don't quite equate the way they need to see the success that we want, is with our speech language pathologists. So the number of students requiring speech language supports is also increasing, and we see a fairly quick pace. And there are a few reasons for that. So right now, for example, we have 658 students on the caseload, and we have 2 speech language pathologists. Only about half of those students have been seen by the school's speech language pathologist this year. It doesn't mean that they're not being connected to with our rest of our team, but as far as a very targeted plan of support put in place, the SLPs, our speech language, have not been able to connect to put that structured plan in place. They can give ideas, strategies, and all of those things, but not the plan. We have five communicative disorder assistants who work, and that is a higher level of qualification than an educational assistant, who implement the plans, or they call it the therapy, or that's being put in place by the speech language pathologist. And they're waiting. In a lot of cases, they need to wait on the plan to be put in place. So that's where the bottleneck kind of happens, is the fact that we have the 2 SLPs to get that work coming down to reach the students. Again, we're not alone in this challenge. And our board, school boards service mild to moderate speech language difficulties. CHIO and other services are moderate to severe. Their caseloads are years and years. So then it becomes the added challenge, because our caseload is mild to moderate. Plus, we have the moderate to severe students with a moderate to severe level of speech impairment that are waiting on service that is far off in the future, or feels far off to families. So we're also, in some cases, we're supporting, because our SLPs work for our school board, they're putting strategies in place to say, in the meantime, right? So it's stretching it. And then the other thing that's further stretching it is First Words was a group that was supporting our students, our little ones up to the age of 6 with speech language. And that has stopped. So now those students are coming to us. And then the Children's Treatment Center has just informed us that they too will be stopping their service. This is JK and up. And so that will further increase the caseloads for our speech language pathologists. So that's a tricky area for us right now. And then the third point that we said, and it's a challenge and a success all in one, and it's that we're continuing to see an increase in students requiring complex services to develop regulation skills and maintain student and staff safety. So we have partnered with tiered supports in building capacities to support these students. And we're also right now reviewing our current practices
as far as the creation of IEPs for these students. So this takes a little bit of narrative as well. So I'm going to, you can pause me at any time, but, a quick, we, 2019, we did a whole special education review for our board. And what came out of that is as a recommendation, and it was one that we felt was there too, is the need to support the students of the profile that we're talking about that would combine with tiered supports to meet their needs. The board brought in CPS, collaborative problem solving, and looked at expectation charts and assessment of unsolved problems and a very structured approach to support the needs of these students because it was needed and that we've made great gains there. So in moving towards that, what left was, because we don't want to do paperwork for the sake of paperwork, so what was removed was doing behavior IEPs or anything like that, because it was being tracked and supported through the paperwork that came with the assessment, the expectation charts and the ASIPs, we call them. So we thought that was just great. We also have what we get, it's called special incidents portions. So this is students with complex needs, and the ministry can provide us with further funding for these students. So we've done that for many, many years, and it was this careful tracking system of students. We'd go like 5-minute intervals and track where they were in. And what came out of that, what comes out of that is up to $28,000 per student for this extra amount of funds. And what we realized is that the students who were meeting the criteria or being captured within the ministry, process to do this were students who are already in a small class, because the ratio of adults to students was great enough. Yes, great enough that it was that they met the criteria. And we weren't capturing the 98% of our or like our students who are not in a small class, who are out in the mainstream. So we did again meet with the ministry, and we asked them to meet with us, and they did, and they listened and they connected. And then what we noticed last year was they expanded the definition of a student who meets the criteria for SIP, this special incidents portion. And we carefully looked through it and made sure that we knew the students that we were presenting and that they met the criteria, because we always want to be transparent with our process and everything like that. And so we had our students, and they met, we felt good about them. Added this year just as maybe it was, I feel like some boards, because this criteria had expanded, there would be an opportunity to tuck more students in, because it was kind of a broader definition. We didn't do that. We were very careful, and we knew every student, and we were confident that we did it the right way. But I think because of maybe the ministry questioned it because the numbers grew overall, I would say across the province, school boards were audited. So we were audited this year, and we met with the ministry, and they went through all of our SIP information. We had to pull random IEPs and random documentation. Jenny and I then had to present this with the ministry, rep to ministry, and what they said is, yes, your information is sound, you've been transparent, every student meets the definition. What they didn't include in the definition was that the student also required an IEP. So we had students that we were meeting their needs, they did meet the SIP criteria, but because we were using ASIPs and expectation charts and no IEP attached to them, we didn't get funded for them.
We wouldn't qualify.
We wouldn't
in the
qualify.
category for funding that they're looking at right now.
Yeah, so they again, what they said is the only thing you're missing is the IEP. So for that reason, we are going to be shifting back just for now to the level 1 safety students. So that will add some IEPs to our work, to what we do in our numbers. And I just needed to explain that that was the reason behind it. And I understand where they're coming from there too. So that was our third area. And just under next steps, we continue to collaborate with all of our central departments and school teams. We absolutely don't want it to be special education on the side. We've been working so closely with our central teams and our central admin teams and our school teams, and seeing the benefits of that for sure. Linking back to the intervention plans, the benefits of that is linking, with our literacy department and doing, foundational literacy skills, all of those things that are on our Acadian screenings, and I'm sure things you will hear from when the literacy group presents. And that partnership has helped us with those intervention plans to move forward, as well as with our math teams and all of the other central teams. So that's been a priority for us. We've also had the implementation of a newly developed resource. And that resource we called Removing Barriers, Academic Success for Every Learner. And we've shared that with all schools, and then with administrators, with school teams. And then this year we did an IEP moderating session with each school. And we went through this document again to really talk about, are we using every support we have at every level? And is there making sure we don't miss anything before we decide to shift to more of a specialized or individualized program for a student? That maybe what could we be doing, in the classroom or at each stage to meet their needs there. So that's been exciting. And actually it was included last year in the OPSOA report. We presented. OPSPA. We gave some ideas, and then this year we got a call from someone saying, this is really exciting. Can we learn more? And I think as the province is now looking at that as a guideline or a model or a framework for schools to use. So that's pretty exciting. Also individualized student programming and transition planning. This was a big component of the grants that we had applied for, to make sure that we are really doing an individualized program approach to making sure we're meeting the needs of students to ensure successful transitions. And along the way, whether they're entering school, transitioning to elementary to high school, and really leaving high school. And that has been a big focus for us right now for all of our students. And so that's a work in progress, but I feel like we're making great gains there, as well as system-wide capacity building and enhancing staff expertise across the system. I think I spoke to this a little bit at the beginning, but certainly making sure that any knowledge that we can share to help schools run as effectively and efficiently as possible, we're doing that. We're wanting to put everyone in a position to meet the needs of all students in all classrooms in all schools.
Okay, great. Thanks, Angie. Lots of great information there. Questions, comments, wonderings about Jody?
I'll be frank, a lot of this went over my head. But so maybe you addressed this. I was trying to understand. You started out by saying we had budgeted over 780,000. With that budget, what were our goals and how did we track them?
Well, I would say that the goals, we're looking at the outcomes of supporting students with special education needs. That budget was approved mainly to support the staffing that helps to be able to support students in the schools and their classrooms. So when we're looking at the effectiveness of the work that we're doing, it depends on what specific aspect we're talking about. So we have different measurements, like as an example, we have goals in relation to how many psychoeducational assessments will take place. And then the reports that will come to support students in regards to that. The teachers who work with the students with supporting who are blind or have low vision, they would have individualized student goals. So they would be working towards and tracking that at a very student by student level. So some of the outcomes that we're working towards are very individual and student focused. On a broader level, last week we also shared with you some of the data in connection to students with special education needs and the outcomes on provincial assessments. So that's a big piece that we're looking at, because we feel that if we're providing supports, we should be seeing an increase in that data and those outcomes. So that's one. We also are looking at we introduced a measurement with our students with alternative program goals connected to our student achievement plan, which is a survey to find out from parents how confident they are in the goals that we've established for their children. We did not share that with you this time, the results of that. We will share it with you in the future, just because we didn't have the uptake on the survey that we would have liked to have in the first go around. So we're redistributing that with the second round of IEPs. So we hopefully will be able to bring that to you so that you can have a look at that data. And also the graduation rates that we drew attention to in terms of thinking about our outcomes, because while we know it's not the pathway for all students. We still do want to see an increase in the trajectory of the students who are graduating, who are supported by specialized services, which is something that we are seeing and we have seen in recent years. So we are happy about that.
And thank you, that does answer my question. And the follow-up question is, do you think, like with these goals, did we have targets? And do you think that the amount we budgeted was enough to meet those targets? Do we need to budget more, budget less? Like when it comes later, what do we need to do?
Yeah.
And how do we know if we've hit it?
Yeah, I think there are different, actually you can jump into it. It is difficult to be able to say in all aspects of specialized services, were we able to meet targets that we may have hoped for? There are certainly areas of challenge, and that's why we did want to share that with you. We don't feel, when we look at the supports that we have in place and the increasing needs across the system, that we have over supported any areas. We do feel like we have some areas that we are challenged in right now. And so I know it's always a difficult conversation because we know we always say, what is it that we would stop doing if we had to put more money towards special services? It would be very difficult for us to identify an area within specialized services where we felt we could pull from to support the areas where we have challenges.
I think that's fair.
So helpful, Jody?
Can I'll add, I'll just add on.
Sure.
So over time, the education system has sort of shifted away from setting SMART goals, like looking at data and going, okay, by June of 2026, we're going to see a 5% increase, like spending a lot of time on goal setting. That we've shifted away from that. The ministry has us look at indicators. So we have the student achievement plan, and there are 11, I think, that are common across the province. And then we've added 6. So we have 17 indicators in total. And then some of those, like, for example, all of the EQAO results as an example, we shared some of those disaggregated, right? Students with special education needs and without. And so we don't spend a lot of time now on trying to set, we want to increase by 5% or 4%. What we look at is, are we improving? So here's where we are. Are we getting better? Kind of like what Marion said earlier. Are we improving? Are we kind of staying the same, or are we actually going in the wrong direction? And we spend more time on identifying the key actions and monitoring the impact. So I would say that there's been a shift in terms of target setting and more now like knowing where we are. And also I would say, if I use EQAO as that satellite data example, if I use literacy as an example, well, we have other pieces of data we're collecting along the way to know whether or not we're on track or not. So the team mentioned the reading screeners, right? So they use that in the moment to know which students we don't wait till the grade 3 EQAO results come out for reading to know whether or not we were successful or not. We use data along the way to monitor and to intervene. And so they gave a lot of, how many students were supported through intervention plans?
800 and
Yeah. So 800 students, and it's
Closer to 9.
data informed, right? So we've used data to identify the students that need the intervention plans. And those intervention plans are not IEPs. It's to try to avoid having a student put on an IEP. So I'm just trying to add to what they said, just in terms of, we don't typically set targets anymore, but we're looking at our data over time. Are we getting better? Are we stagnant, or are we getting worse? So that's good.
And always wanting to be on the trajectory of getting better.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's a goal, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think, and I'll just maybe put this to the group, the EQAO, maybe SMART goals are still kind of stuck in my head, because the EQAO kind of makes sense, and we can say like, okay, we budgeted enough, that was the amount. But like, of course, the more money you put at anything, it's always going to get better. And I think when it comes to the budget time, we have to decide what we want. So I'm still like, when you say 800 students have intervention plans, like, are they is that a good thing? You know what I mean? Like it's and to how, what ends are they serving? And it could be that I'm just missing it, but I'm just trying to get my head around it, I guess, still.
Yeah.
And I think that the data that the team would be looking at that level would be, we have 800 students right now. And then how many out of that 800, out of those students, how many ended up having to have an IEP? Because that means we didn't close the gaps.
Okay.
And how many did it work?
Yeah.
Where we closed the gaps. That's the type of data that they monitor.
Okay, and that's what will be reported to us?
Could be.
Yeah,
Mhm.
like
Like-
now, I
yeah.
didn't bring it in with me, but we have it for last year and this year really broken down to by grade
Mhm.
and by where people said it was like limited, some, good or great, really. And because it's fairly new and because we're looking at it, like when I summarized it, you know, we might have made grades in grade 1 and we still have time in grade 2 and grade 3 to make more. But certainly we will be able to track and say, okay, how many of these students maybe by grade 4 had an IEP or did not have an IEP? Yeah, great.
Okay, fine. What does that grade by grade perspective look like? Because our belief is that with the focus on interventions, the outcome that we're looking for is a decrease in IEPs as the students get older, and especially a decrease in the IEPs where they have a modified program. So there may be IEPs for accommodations to help them be successful, but reducing the number where we are actually changing the curriculum expectations from the grade level expectations of the grade placement. So that's what we are monitoring.
And it's too early now, but maybe in a year or so, we'd be able to see that. Is that, or am I on a completely different path?
Yeah, well, we actually, one of the things that we talked about doing when we bring the next strat plan update to you in September was to have a little focus on that area as well, because we've been working through like an IEP auditing process. And so we're doing that now. And part of our plan was that we would consider bringing more information around the IEP audits in September, if that's something you'd be interested in.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
Anyway, I just have a couple. So we had talked about, you know, some of the students that have, lack of a better word, but deficits. But here you have 11 children identified as gifted. So what are we doing for the gifted?
Yeah, so we do support those students. That would be so an identification of gifted would be in the top 2 percentile of 100 students, just like a developmental disability would be in the bottom 2. So when we look at that, when we can clearly see the need for some creative programming and some structured, you know, individualized programming for students with a development in the bottom 2 percentile, so too is the need for the top 2. So we do support our schools in that. We don't have a gifted program per se, and we have a lot of students who don't, who would not have been had a psych ed to show that they're gifted. So we support our schools for planning for gifted and exceptional students, gifted and high academic achieving students, or even students, to be quite honest, who aren't achieving academically high, but we know, or there's a sense that this student is, you know, if there was a psych ed, might have been identified as gifted, they need something to connect, because our goal as an education system is we continue to learn how to learn. And I'm now aging myself, but I've been with special education for quite a while. And even when I was in school, what we were seeing is some of our students who, you know, are very bright students, they didn't have to learn how to learn in school. It just came easy to them in school and in high school. And then maybe they were hitting that struggle when they were in university or beyond. And all of a sudden, it's like something did not come easy to them. They did not know it. And they had no idea what to do with that, right? So that we might not be seeing the struggles while they were with us, but we know these struggles happened after, which put the emphasis on making sure that we're suitably challenging our students, all students at all times, so that they do learn how to learn. And we stay ahead of that to make sure that we're meeting their needs as well. And in some cases, it sometimes looks like a really creative class. Like I can think of a student now, and you know, as far as the more academic subjects, but that student chose to take a woodworking class. Because when we talk to that student about how we could really challenge their brain and how to make them start to think in ways they don't naturally think, it was hands-on and it was something. And so that met that student's needs without anything formal being put in place. It was just some really thinking about them and talking about them with their timetable and what they would like. And we also, there's the student enrichment program, ECPP. I know that there's more letters than I just, I'm aware of that. The mini enrichment programs that the University of Ottawa U and Carleton University put on. Carleton is our focus this year, and we do have students that will be offering, if they would like to go to that between the grade 9 this year. Yeah, so we offer that every year as well.
The other thing I have, just with the numbers of ASD and those that have speech and language issues. Do you have like plans in place to help those that are kind of like on the wait list? Because for the speech and language to have like 658 students on the caseload and having 76 new referrals, so it seems like a lot, right? And I think with the new right to read, like how is that affecting that as well? Like what are we putting in place to help these students achieve more?
You'll probably give a stronger answer than mine, but what I would say is we're doing everything we can. We're using every strategy we have as educators and special education educators to put things in place. The challenge comes when they need a therapeutic component to that speech. We don't have the skills or the right, to be quite honest, to put those goals, really those those really specific things that are tailored to a student in place. We have overall, all of our primary teachers would be teaching sounds, right? They'd be teaching the R sound and the S sound and the W sounds. We also know the ones that are like TH and S are tricky, right? So we can have some support with that through our certs. But when we're getting into actually like how you move your tongue or how you do things with your mouth to make sounds come out the right way, those are the students that until they see a speech language pathologist, we're not then putting a program in place with our communicative disorder assistants to do that because we don't have that education to put that in place, or even really the right to do it. Speech language pathologists are also governed by another governing body, a college that they're accountable to. And in order to do that work, you need to be registered with that college. So we put in everything we can, and it's not nothing, right? But when you get into really tricky things, we're at a standstill. It's kind of like the same with any of our students with physical disabilities or anything like that. When we're deciding if they're going to get a standing desk or a trike or anything you might see, we don't, like as far as specialized equipment, we don't make those decisions. Our OTs and our PT, our occupational therapists that work with CHIO make those decisions so that we're doing something that is tailored to the student, so that we're not doing any, for lack of a better word, we're not going rogue or going make any harm along the way. Yeah.
Yeah, Krista, go ahead. Just to build off of that, we do know, like the research is clear that oral language is foundational to reading and writing. What I would say is I've noticed a shift with the implementation of the science of reading from the balanced literacy approach. When we implement the science of reading to now the approach structured literacy, there's a greater emphasis, and that's in primary and continues, but starts in kindergarten and works its way up. There's a much greater emphasis on the sounds and on phonics. And so that should help our students. What I'm talking about is teachers at the tier 1 level in the classroom, focusing on that more than they have for the last couple decades. So that's a positive shift, and that came out of the right to read, right? That change to the approach to literacy instruction, which that should help some of our students. It will not close the gaps for all students, but a greater emphasis on the sounds and on phonics will help some. So our teachers having that training is really, that's a positive, a positive step in the right direction.
Yeah, I think there's 8 key ones on the screening that they're using, and blending, segmenting, oral reading fluence, all really everything we can do, I would say we are now doing with the approach. Yeah, in a more focused way than we were before as well. Yeah.
I just had one quick. Did you?
No, that's it. Thank you.
One quick question.
Sounds like you're doing amazing work with limit. You've got a lot of resources, but you could use more, right? That's always the challenge. And we know that that's always been a challenge with special education because there are more and more needs. So thank you for bringing that information. The other piece I just wondered about, though, I know we have a lot of EAs and a lot of EAs that support the students that are in need. Do you have can you tell me how many EAs we have out there? Approximately, just to kind of get a feel for that, because I know there are a lot.
I don't even think it's approximate. I think we can give you the
Yeah.
exact
Yeah,
number.
we'll actually just pull that.
Yeah.
I'll see if I can find that.
While Jenny's
document.
pulling it, it is interesting because what we sometimes hear is we have fewer EAs, we actually have more EAs in our system now than we ever have. The needs have increased. We don't have fewer EAs. There's just,
We just have more needs.
and we're big.
If I have them.
Oh, you have it? I just found it too.
Yeah, I can actually, well, I'll just read it off verbally. So, so we shared this with the leadership team, just a couple weeks ago. So in 2022-23, at budget time in June, we budgeted for 185 EAs. At revised estimates in December that year, we were at 191. So we added approximately 6 EAs. And then 23-24 budget, so June leading into that school year, we budgeted for 187.5. So let's round up 188. By December of that school year, we're at 198. So through the revised estimates process last school year, we added 10. And then this school year, so in June of 2024, we budgeted for 193. So less than where we were at December, but we were more than where we were the year before at budget. And then at revised, we went up to 203. So again, we added 10 through revised estimates. So from June until December of this school year, we added 10. That does not include Jordan's principal EAs because they are funded by Indigenous Services Canada. And there are some changes that are coming through related to Jordan's principal funding. But that number does include the communicative disorder assistance.
And the inclusion support
Yeah.
system.
Thank you. And the ISIS.
12
Yes,
central.
yes, we have set 12 central positions between those two roles. But over the last 3 years, like if we look at June of 2022, we budgeted for 185, and where we sit today is 203. So we've almost added 20 over 2.5 years.
That's a lot. I mean, sounds like a lot, but we know that they're well needed.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think sometimes we forget how many there are out there. You know, that's always an issue of, we needing more and more and more. And I suspect part of it is you can't always even get more if you needed more, right? There aren't enough qualified as well, so.
We did share this report with our CIAC committee last week as well, just so you're aware. And Jen came as part of the budget consultation, so we were able to share some information with them, and they also provided some feedbacks.
Okay, thank you very much. Very helpful, very useful. Lots of
Thank you.
food for thought, right? For future conversations. So thanks, Angie. Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you.
And I think with that, that brings us to the end of our agenda. Unless there's anybody else that wants to add anything at this point in time. Another time, right, Jody?
Oh, yes, I sent my email.
Very much. So with that, I would love to have somebody make a motion to adjourn. Leo, thank you. And Jody will second that. All those in favor? Kim and Christina are in agreement. Excellent. Thank you very much, everybody. This meeting is adjourned. And we'll see many of you, hopefully most of you tomorrow. Thank you.